Good everyone. I hope you're having an amazing day. So today I'll be starting a new series. That's an integration series, right? This is a bit different compared to the previous series I've done, like Apex for Admins or Platform Dev One, because I'm gonna walk you through an integration workshop from a consultant perspective, right? We're gonna mimic a workshop, right? So we're gonna talk about inbound APIs. We're gonna talk about outbound APIs. We're gonna talk about Salesforce Connect. So this is all what I'm gonna cover as a part of this series, right? So I won't be talking integration merely from a developer perspective, but from a consultant perspective, right? Because you might get an opportunity to work as a Salesforce consultant. Salesforce consultants are different from a Salesforce developer. I mean, Salesforce technical consultants, they're different from a developers because a developer, usually the role of a developer, as you all know, right? To write code, get the requirement, that's pretty much, you know, and other stuff, right? Depending upon a company to company. But if you are a consultant, right, you might have to, do workshops with the customer. You might have to do technical workshops, at time functional workshops as well, right? Based on the organization you work for, right? Some company expect you to know both functional and technical stuff, right? So you might have to, liaise with the client, help them understand the stuff, and gather requirement and try to think from their perspective. Remember one thing, right? When you are dealing with a user, right? Users are subject matter expert on their domain, right? But they may not be having enough experience on the Salesforce side of things because, most of the times what happens is that you are trying to convince user to move on to the Salesforce platform. Some users might have worked with Salesforce before, so they do understand what you're talking about. But at times, always start with that assumption that user don't have much idea about the Salesforce, but they are subject matter expert in their domain, right? Whatever domain it is, insurance domain or brewing domain or finance or whatever, right? They are the subject matter expert. They are highly experienced on their specific aspect, right? For instance, they might be using SAP, okay? They know in and out of SAP, like how the end of day report works, how to do accounts payable, how to do accounts receivable, right? But they may not know how to do that things in Salesforce, okay? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start with the scenario, okay? So we're gonna deal with XYZ company, right? Let's say it's a brewing company. So we have it's a fictitious company. So we have a brewing company in Wellington, okay? So let's say XYZ brewing company. As you know, the role of a brewing company, right, to brew beers or other products, right? So they are using different systems, right? Let's say XYZ systems, and they have decided to use Salesforce as a primary source of a CRM system, right? So now they have big challenges around migrating to Salesforce. So that's what we're going to talk about today as a part of integration. Okay. So when you're going to a workshop, right, the first thing you have to understand that you have to make sure that you feel comfortable, right? You have to talk the language with the user understand. It is very important. Please do not start with the technical jargon because you might be expecting non-technical people attending the workshop, right? So it's very important. You should not be using technical jargon all the time, right? Because they might get confused and they were like, what the heck are you talking about? We don't, it doesn't make sense. We are used to, some users, right? Some operators, they are used to, button click like F11, F12 will print the report. So they might ask you, can we do that, right? So you can expect different wide range of audience when you're doing a workshop, right? Okay, so let's jump into the topic here. So as we discussed, XYZ Brewing Company decides to move their entire operation on Salesforce, right? So they maintain customer information, right? So they maintain product information, right? The kind of products they do, right? Now, the questions you have to ask, the first thing, okay? So let's start with Salesforce here. This is a sticky note. I'm using Google Jamboard, pretty good, right? Check it out. I mean, you can use it if you have a Google account, right? Okay, so we're gonna say it's a Salesforce. Okay, so let's close it. So I'm gonna move it here, right? This is Salesforce, and now they have an external system which they're currently using. Yeah, so we have an external system. Okay, so this is their current system, or let's say current system, right? current system. Okay, so they're using the current system. Okay, so now what they wanted to do, they wanted to move the data from a current system to Salesforce. Okay, right. So this is exactly what they wanted to do. Okay, so because they maintain a few stuff like um, so you have to ask what are the things they maintain. So they maintain accounts. Okay, so we're gonna keep it very simple, okay? So we don't complicate it because I don't want it to drag this session like an hour or 3 hours. We just wanted to make it simple, just to give you a context to how to do consulting or how to take workshop, okay? So the things you need to ask, the kind of information they maintain here, right? Okay, so you can say the accounts, right? And they say just to keep it very simple, right? We're not gonna put and there's a product, right? Because obviously it's a brewing company, so they have to keep information of the products, okay? And so, right, so they do products, and these are the things they obviously maintain it, right? So these are the things, and other things they can probably talk about the timesheet, for instance, because obviously they are doing other stuff as well. So let's say they maintain timesheet as well, okay? Right, so we can maintain timesheet, right? I'm just giving an example, right? Just say they do maintain timesheet, or for whatever reason, they do timesheet as well. Okay. And I don't want it to talk about other things like accounts payable, accounts receivable. Then it get very complicated. Okay. Now, the requirement is they wanted to move this stuff, accounts, product, and timesheet to the Salesforce, right? It's pretty straightforward, right? Obviously, when you are moving the stuff from the current system to the Salesforce, the first thing you need to ask that for the data you have to move, okay, the kind of data you have to move. So in this case, it's an account, product, and timesheet, right? So which is great. So now, as a Salesforce consultant, you can say that you have to ask a question, right? Uh, what should be the source of truth of data, source of actual data? Sorry, what I meant by that is you need to ask, right? Uh, the the sorry, you need to ask the customer, right? Are they going to maintain accounts, products, and timesheet going forward, or will they be stop using the current system once they migrate everything to Salesforce, right? So, for instance, right, we have account information. So you have 50 accounts, for instance. 50 accounts means the 50 customers. So they maintain customer information under account object in this current system, whatever the system is, could be anything, right? So now, if the customer says to you, right, look, I do not want the account record to be maintained anymore under current system going forward, so you can use something called data loader to pull the data through the Salesforce. This is a one-off option, okay? So you can say data loader, because the thing is, if you're a Salesforce consultant, right, or you can use data import depending upon the amount of data you want to pull. If it's more than 50,000, then you have to use data loader, right? So let's say you're going to go with the data loader, okay? So you're going to use data loader here, okay? And so you will use the data loader in this case, okay? So data loader will push the data to the Salesforce, okay? So the account part is sorted because customers said they will no longer be maintaining any account information in the current system once they migrate to Salesforce, okay? So that part is good, okay? We don't have to worry about it. We can cross this out, okay? So we can cross this out, okay? Now, with the product, there is a bit of confusion here. So what they wanted to do is that they still want to retain the product information going forward. What they want to do was that they obviously want to migrate all the product information to the Salesforce, but for whatever bizarre reason, they want to create products in the current system, right? So what they mean by that is, let's say I have a product P. Say, let's say I have a product P, okay, right? So P1, then we have P2, right? So they want all this product to be moved, migrated to Salesforce, right? But they still want to create new product under current system, right? And so what they wanted to do is that every day they create it or whenever they create a new product, they wanted the information to be synced to the Salesforce. So they do not want one source of truth. They basically want to replicate the source of truth. They want to create a product here and they want to sync it here. So if that happens, right, in that scenario, you need to ask the customer, what is the reason behind it, right? Why do you want it? Then you have to explain to customer there is a problem of data duplicacy can happen, right? So what if, it's an overhead, right? Because it's a dual work. You create the stuff here, then you expect the data to be moved to Salesforce. Someone has to identify whether that has happened, right? Let's say um, customers said, no, this is what we wanted for whatever audit reason. We still wanted to maintain this current system of products, let's say for 6 months, right? After that, they will migrate everything to the Salesforce. So for whatever reason, they decided to keep using the product under current system for 6 months. Okay, so accounts is being moved, so no questions about that. So they don't want to do anything to do with the accounts. And now timesheet, right? Timesheet is complicated. So the timesheet part is even complicated because they're saying they are not filing a timesheet directly to the current system, but they're using a third-party system to file the timesheet. So what that means by is this timesheet here, it is getting filed in a separate application which is embedded to this current system. So what I meant by that, current system has a capability where a third party, let's say timesheet app is called, let's say third party called TT, right? TT built a timesheet app which is hosted in a third party server and a third party application. They embedded this timesheet in a form of a web app to the current system. Okay, so basically, the data for the timesheet resides somewhere else, not under the current system. Okay, I explain it again. Right, I know it's confusing. Okay, so current system, right? So current system maintains its own database. Okay, which is hosted. Let's say, to keep it simple, it's an on-prem system, right? We don't want to talk about the cloud or anything here because we want to keep the integration very simple. Okay, so let's say they're hosted. It's called database, right? So let's say it's a database. Okay, so you can say, right? So they have hosted. Let's say, just wanted to make it this. Right, this is the database. Yeah. Okay, and so the current system maintains a database, right? So this is a database to maintain it. Yeah, and account information is stored in this database. Product information gets stored in database, but not the timesheet. Timesheet gets stored in a separate database, which is owned by TT, which is a third-party company, right? So which is called the database. We call it that. Okay. Now, okay, so this is how it works. Okay. Now, so the moving the database, the timesheet information to the Salesforce is a bit tricky. So you have to ask the customer, is it possible? Do they still want to maintain the timesheet viewing information under current system, or will it be okay for them to move the stuff to the Salesforce? Okay, so the things you need to understand here in this case, right? You can use the data loader to push the data to the timesheet, but is that really a great solution? First of all, right? Because if you think about from the current system, right, they are not maintaining the data related to timesheet under the current system database. Instead, it's maintained by a third-party application, right? So now you have to ask, what's the best practice? So in this case, we won't be using a data loader or an API to pull the data. Instead, we will use something called Salesforce Connect, right? Where you can actually view an external data, right? Inside the Salesforce, you can view an external data inside the Salesforce as if it's a part of Salesforce, okay? I repeat it again. You can view an external data within a Salesforce as if it's a part of Salesforce, but the difference is you will not be storing that data inside the Salesforce. Okay, so you are not taking the data and putting into the Salesforce. Yeah, that's the first thing. So that's the Salesforce Connect. We're going to talk about it. Okay, right now we have product information, right? So they want to get the product, right? So they want to get the product stuff to be pulled to the Salesforce, all the existing products, right? So you can use the data loader, as I talked about it. But for every other day-to-day operation, right? As I said, that for another 6 months, they still want to keep the product in the current database and the Salesforce database. So you can use an APIs to push the data to the Salesforce, okay? Right? So you can do, Salesforce can pull the data or the current system can push the data. So in this scenario, right, this is where integration comes in the picture. Who is the initiator of the data creation in this case? Is the current system, right? Because Salesforce is not creating any product. Now, another question is, you have to ask the customer, that's great, the current system is initiating, but what happens if you create a product inside the Salesforce? So So the client said it should be pushed back as well, which is, in my opinion, is a bizarre, solution because it's like a data duplication, creating a product here. But they said, this is what they want for whatever reason, 6 months, they wanted to keep it. Okay. So we got no choice in that case. Okay. So in that case, so you have only one option, right? So you need to expose your APIs, okay, Salesforce API to the current system so that they can push the data to the product. Okay. Now, before we jump into the API, right? Before we jump into code, before we talk about code, you need to look at implication of this kind of design. Okay, which is very important because you should never suggest a customer the first solution that you have in mind. That's not how a workshop is conducted, right? So you have to talk about few things here. Okay, the first thing you have to ask: how often the data get created on the current system? Okay, let's say they talk about product creation. Is it one off? Is it like once in a month? Let's say two products get. Think about a brewing system, right? How often do you think a new product get launched? Right? It's not often that you know a new product get launched every 10 days, right? I mean, if that's the case, that's a different story. If the current system will tell you, right, okay, I'm going to create a new product. We are working on a new product of, let's say a lager beer with have a different flavor, right? Let's say a product, they're launching a new product called current system lager beer, 8% alcohol, uh, flavors like citrusy flavor and other flavor, right? A brand of a beer they wanted to launch, okay? Now, if they're going to launch a product, let's say, in a 4 month, one product, okay, and they've wanted to retain this current system only for 6 months, then you might as well, manually create the current product information in Salesforce, right? Why bother using an API? Why building an integration, right? It's an overhead, right? It costs you a developer time, okay? So you need to consider cost as well when you're dealing with integration. There are a lot of things a consultant has to do. That's why I said consultant role is a little bit different to a developer role because you have to keep into consideration the cost. Obviously, you are trying to help customer to move on to a better solution so that they get more effective, cost effective as well, and they can maintain everything at one place. And Salesforce is a great platform. Okay, so product information. So now we have agreed that only one product get created. So why bother building an integration in the first place? Okay, right? That's right? Because there's no point that exposing an APIs to the current system, and the current system will push the data to the Salesforce. That's one thing, right? But if it's only a product get created, let's say after 4 months, and only one information get pushed into Salesforce, right? And after 6 months, They want to shut down the current system, so it makes no sense. Yeah. Okay. So now we agreed we do not need an API layer in between. Yeah. So we don't need an API. So we don't need any API. So no APIs, right? Okay. Now let's say we figured out they have another system. Let's say the client said, "Oh, you know what? I remember one thing. There's one more system." Okay. So we're gonna talk about. Um, so they maintain. So uh, there is an information about, uh, say, it's a brewing company. They wanted to acquire, um, say, they wanted to acquire another company, right? Or they're planning in the process of acquiring. Okay, you know what? Just forget about it. Just make it simple. Okay. Well, we stick to it because you don't want to complicate it. Okay. Now, let's say another scenario where they say, "Oh, you know what? We're gonna make every new product every four days." You know, be a brewing company, they come up with a new recipe every 4 days. It's highly ambitious, but just say for whatever bizarre reason, that's what ambitious company every 4 days. So obviously, right, 4 days there will be a lot of products pushing. So in that case, you need to have an API creator here. So you need to provide them an API to Salesforce. Okay. So now you need to ask the customer, right? Does the current system have a capability to consume an API or to push the data to an API? Or do they need developer uh, to build one, right? Because you need to ask these questions. Because in this case, right, if they are saying the current system is the source of truth, okay, if the current system is the source of truth where they're building a product every 4 days, so it makes total sense to push the data to a Salesforce, right? So so in that case, you can use API. Yeah, that's a very simple thing. I will talk about different integration pattern going forward, but not today. Okay. So let's stick with a very simple API stuff here. You can use a SOAP, right? But the thing with the SOAP is that you have to use XML, right? And it's okay. I mean, it's a kind of a legacy technology, but APIs are, going forward. Most of the firms still use API. APIs are lightweight, right? But that being said, SOAP has its own advantage, right? So we're not going to talk about SOAP today, right? Um, so so we decided that Salesforce will expose an API. Okay. Now you must be thinking, why do we need to expose an API? Okay. So as I said, current system is initiator, right? Current system will create a product. Okay. So the current system is creating a product here. Okay. So when the current system is creating a product, so it's the responsibility of current system to initiate the push. Okay. It makes it very simple, right? And the current system has a capability to consume an API supplied by Salesforce. Okay, and to push it. So what we have right now, we all we need to do is to create a connected app in a Salesforce, right? Enable auth, right? And give the connected system developer credentials and expose the product API so that it can push the information. So um, now the thing you have to keep into consideration, right? Uh, the product API, right? So do you want to use a that's actually not a part of the integration workshop, but I'm just generally talking out loud so that you can think behind the scene, right? Do you want to use the existing product standard object or you wanted to use the custom object? Because you have to keep the licenses into consideration as well, right? Amount of licenses the current user needs. So it's always better to use a custom object if like for instance if you are dealing with the order, right? And you have to worry about the Salesforce license because if you are not using Salesforce license, if you're using a other license, right, chatter license, you can't use order object directly. So that's why I'm saying that you have to keep that into consideration as well. But I don't want to bring that in, just saying. So API design, okay? So we don't have to create an API here because Salesforce has inbuilt APIs. You just have to expose it, okay? Because the current system can consume it and write a product information here, okay? So the basic stuff we're going to do here, because um, the current system will be creating products, okay, and every 4 days, and they want to be pushed to Salesforce. And we have agreed that they will not be creating any products within Salesforce till they use current system. Okay, so so they don't want a bi-directional push. Okay, push or pull. So no data will be pushed from Salesforce to current system. Only thing what's going to happen now, they're going to push the data from current system to Salesforce. So as a consultant, so you can suggest, oh yeah, it's pretty straightforward. What we can do, we can create a managed app, right? Connected app, and you can expose to Salesforce API, and you can give the credentials, and you can test that using Postman, and sit with the developers of the current system, and if they have one, if they do not have, then you have to help them, right? So that's the thing you have to ask. Okay, that's beyond the scope of this discussion because we are strictly focusing on integration. The reason why I talked about everything, because I'm taking you through from a consultant perspective, how you handle a workshop, right? You might have to handle non-integration stuff, like you see. So yeah. So in this case, as we discussed, so this is our integration. We will expose the Salesforce API, right, to the current system, and they will be pushing the data. Okay, so I've talked about how to create a connected apps, and how to write your own code, right? I'll put the link in the description below because I would highly encourage you to check it out, right? Because you should know how to do that, right? Now, I don't want to talk about this again because I've already covered this before, so I will put the link in the description below. Okay, so this is pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this session because this is how I wanted to talk to you guys about integration. Because I don't want to just talk about the tools, right? I've done that enough in my other chapters, other lectures, right? Now, I just wanted to give you a glimpse of real consulting experience. Though, I'll be honest, this is not exactly 100% how we do it, but it's just the flavor, of how to do a consulting, right? There are a lot of other questions user will be asking. They will ask non-technical questions. Some will say, okay, how will the user interface will look like, right? Do I have to do anything when the sync happens? Or then you have to ask the user, right? Will it be a real-time sync, right? When you create a information in the current system, right? Um, will it get synced straight away or can wait overnight? So you have to ask different kind of questions, right? Because if you want a synchronous sync, right, then it has to happen straight away. If you are after asynchronous, then you can use asynchronous processing. In this scenario, you don't have to do anything from a Salesforce side. All you have to do is expose the API, and the current system developers will build it and consume it and push it, right? So that's pretty much yeah, and then and you have to give them the login to the Salesforce, right? And so that they can see if the products has been created. So the thing is, they might ask, current system user, right? Because they have never seen the Salesforce. Oh, so will it be a production system? Or will it be will I have it, some kind of a testing system? So you have to tell them, like, in Salesforce we have a concept called the sandbox, right? So you do everything in the sandbox. You can do partial sandbox and you have full sandbox, right? And then once you're happy with it, once you have to explain through the different process, that's they will know by the stage, because integration is not the first session you normally do, because there are other stuff you talk about it. You talk about, there will be a lot of functional workshop before integration, but just to give you a glimpse, so I talked about other stuff, right? So yeah, it's a different kind of questions, that you need to ask as many questions you want. Because one thing I have to tell you, I'll be very honest about it, never assume thing, right? Because, you might assume, oh, it's very obvious, but it's not so obvious to customer, right? It's very important you make it clear with the customer what exactly you're doing to do, what's the capability of a Salesforce, what all the stuff you can do. Because if you assume things, and the client will come back to you and say, look, this is not what we wanted. And they will say, why did you assume that, right? Because never assume anything in a consulting career, right? You should always consult. You should always put your solution, you can propose a solution, right? If a customer says, no, this is not feasible, right? Or this is not what we wanted, this is very difficult from a user experience perspective, then you have to think about other solutions. So it's always, it's about building a relationship with the customer when you are doing consulting, right? To make them feel comfortable so that you can have a great working relationship. That's the key to a successful implementation project, is to build a strong working relationship with the customer so that they can trust your work and have feel confidence, right? Because they are relying on you to migrate their $1 million or $1 billion worth of data to a new system. So imagine they have to trust you, right? So you have to have a strong working relationship, right? So that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. So we talked about one part of integration, right? Please check out that how to expose a Salesforce API, right? So next time we're going to talk about how to consume an API from on Salesforce, and we write a code, right? And then we talk about Salesforce Connect. We're going to talk about crossover. We're going to talk about OData 2.0, 4.0, and we're going to talk about how to build a custom Apex connector, right, for Salesforce Connect. Okay. That being said, I hope you guys have an amazing Sunday. Take care. Bye bye.